Welcome to Performance Talk with your host, Yul Gordon and Chris Costa, where professionals discuss the latest news and developments in the profession and all areas that affect sports performance, strength and conditioning, nutrition, recovery, performance, and much more. Listen now to your host and this week's guest, next on Performance Talk.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Performance Talk. My name is Yul Gordon. I'm here with Andrew Menter this morning. Andrew, how you doing?
I'm great, Dr. Gordon. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. As I stated when we were off the air, I'm chasing my dog around this morning, but he's good now, so he's in here somewhere.
All right. Glad he's doing well. Mine's hopefully sleeping and not going to interrupt us today. I think we're going to be all right, though.
Well, hey, listen, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do and go right into how you got started with this whole thing.
Okay. Well, I'll start off with a bit of background, and that leads to why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I grew up playing competitive tennis, ended up playing at Brown University.
Okay.
And, wasn't something I wanted to take beyond college, and not to suggest I would have been able to, but didn't have a love of the game. And went from tennis to playing. We now have Major League Rugby, but before that, there was, as close to we got to that was a semi-pro rugby called the Super League, bit of a predecessor. And tennis to rugby seems kind of an odd transition. But
yeah, that just hit me. I was like, from tennis to rugby, how'd you manage that?
Yeah. Well, notwithstanding my accent, I spent the first 8 years of my life in South Africa. So
okay.
Big rugby country, 2-time defending world champions.
Right.
And my uncle played for the Springboks. So I always had a love for the game, and I think rugby fitted my temperament maybe a little better than tennis. So anyway, made that transition, played that for a while, and then got into Ironman and did a few of those, and had the privilege of competing at the World Championships in Kona.
Okay, yeah, right.
And got really lucky. So, you're told not to have a projected time, which is super hard for type A people.
Right.
Because at Kona, the winds could be like 5 miles an hour, or they could be 30, and it was kind of average. I found myself on the way back going 8 miles an hour, literally into the wind. And anyway, after Ironman, I did a lot of CrossFit. So, and during this course of playing all those sports, I beat up my body a lot.
Right.
And interestingly, all on the left side. So I ruptured my Achilles tendon. I got a slap tear. Everyone in CrossFit has rotator cuff, but slap tear. Then I ruptured my bicep tendon, and then I tore my meniscus, and it's all on the left side.
Wow.
That's very asymmetric. Yeah. And that's the number 2 cause of injury behind previous injury is being asymmetric.
Right.
And so I say all this because, a lot of movement injury, a lot of musculoskeletal injuries are preventable.
Yes.
And I had a movement screen done on me in 2014, and it was great. It had me do a variety of movements, told me where I was good, predominantly where I was bad, and gave me a score, gave me indicators of how bad certain things were, and a corrective exercise program. And I loved it. But the issue was it took too long, and I never got a chance to do that screen again because I had to be in front of somebody. 15, 20 minutes is a bit too long. And so with that, I said, surely we can do this quicker. And that was the impetus for Fizmodo, which was, let's create a quick movement screen that's going to get a lot of information about how you're moving, ways to have interventions and protocols to help you prevent some injuries. And again, it's quick, 30 seconds. You can self-assess on your phone or iPad, and that's probably a good starting point because that's how we got to where we are.
Okay. Let's talk about movement screening a little bit, since you've been in that world. So back in those days, it was an 8 camera stationary 1 hour almost event to get a movement screen. And then I'm talking 2006, 2007. Then they got a little bit faster and a little bit more efficient in conducting a reasonable movement screen that you could build a program from. So when you went through your initial movement screening for yourself and all this light bulb and everything came on for you, for call it again, Fismodo.
Correct.
Okay. I've been looking at that for a minute trying to figure out how I was going to pronounce it, but
You got it.
I worked it out, I guess. But anyway, um, you said 20 minutes you felt like 20 minutes and you had to be in front of somebody was a long time. What actually was the trigger for you to say, okay, I think I can make a movement screen, that is more relevant to the times, like faster, self-administered and those kind of things?
So the research across the board will show that the most important movement in terms of getting information about how one moves is the deep squat.
Yeah.
And so with the intent of making this quick, we made the decision, okay, we're just going to stick with the deep squat. And in that, there's the recognition that, sure, we're not going to get all the information that we need, but that's okay. That's plenty of information. We're gonna be able to understand your mobility. We're gonna how flexible you are. We're gonna understand some of your symmetry or posture, and get a lot of information and get it quickly. So that was the thesis. Then it became, okay, so how do we do that? And if you recall the Xbox,
Right.
and the Microsoft Kinect within the Xbox is, there's the hardware, which is the actual depth camera, and then there's the body pose estimator. So if you're playing an Xbox game and you're throwing a baseball, the camera needs to recognize your wrist, your elbow, and your shoulder. So that when you're doing a throwing motion, you can see on the screen and it can throw it for you. Now that camera's built not for biomechanics and getting really precise. It's built for video games,
Right.
gestures. So I'm like, well, can't we take this technology, make it a little better? And we built our own body pose estimator and built it for biomechanics and got a patent around that. So that somebody then could, and at this point, this was 2016, 2017, you had a big Dell monitor, touchscreen, and then that camera.
Right.
And then did the screen, 3 overhead squats, mobility, symmetry, posture, stability. And it was great. It was a great start. People liked it. You got a lot of information, got it quickly. We partnered with TRX. We're very fortunate to do that.
Right.
And we went to the first, or at that time, IRSA, now Health Fitness Association, and did 1,000 screens over 2 days.
Okay.
So we realized we had something. People were getting good information. They liked doing it. And we had some people day one come back on day two. So I'm like, all right, this is good. We can get a lot of movement screens. The problem was that it was very cumbersome. So we had this again, there's a lot of hardware and we
Right.
wanted to get software there wasn't really much to do about it. Fast forward, and we're now able to do that on the iPhone and iPad. So the technology's come a long way. I want to back up. Were you using a Vicon system or Dari or something like that?
Dari.
Yeah. So I know you're the podcaster asking me the questions, but I'm
No, you're
interested
good. No, go
in
ahead.
your experience. So how often were you screening people?
The screens were set up at the time. They were set up for one screen every 8 weeks. If that person was going to be a return client
Hmm.
for screening, it was one every 8 weeks. Just to mainly, it was built around time. Having time to be able to somebody to get in and take an hour out of their day to actually go through the process. Because when you go through it, it's about 40 minutes, and then you allow 20 minutes or so for um preparation and for people to get instruction on what movements we wanted without giving them too much. um and it was kind of cumbersome, like you said.
Yeah,
And
it's a
it
great
was
a, a great system, and you're certainly getting more information
right.
than what we're getting. But I mean, and I'm going to steal the words from Gray Cook because he's the pioneer of a lot of this. But talking about the deep squat, you're getting a multi-dimensional quadruple flexion movement that
Right.
requires balance, symmetry, motive control, and posture, and that's a lot.
Yeah, and we didn't there's a whole posture panel and a whole squat panel, and there was just a lot of things to do in order to get um detail that we could use.
Well, I'm impressed that you're doing it even every couple months
Right. That
because yeah, that's good. I mean, what I will typically hear is, we only do it a couple times. So we're in the University of Tennessee, and they were doing a screen once a semester,
yeah.
and
To clarify, um I have been in the private sector just about my entire career, although I've worked with some teams and stuff like that. But so it was clients that normally saw me, pretty regularly anyway.
okay,
But we had to work the assessment around their actual training session.
yeah,
So if you come in and you're due for a movement assessment this week, you had to schedule an extra hour for your training session because we weren't going to skip the training session to do the assessment.
no, definitely not. And I mentioned Tennessee because we're working with the Olympic teams, for those that don't know, every other sport that isn't football,
Yeah.
and they have 550 athletes. So now the screen sits on the monitor, it's wall mounted, and the athletes can come through, and they're supposed to go once a week. And all that information is fed to the strength coaches, and they can do something with that. And the one reason I really like that, and this is kind of where my passion is right now, because getting away from performance and just how this affects everybody. The medical spend on musculoskeletal exceeds that of metabolic spending,
Yes.
which is nuts. I mean, you think about, we're measuring everything. We're measuring your HbA1c and, your cholesterol and, your HRV now with wearable, everything you can
Yeah.
think of. And yet the most important thing for your health really is movement. We're not measuring it. I mean, it was an interesting study in 2018 from University of North Carolina that correlated bad movement with bad sleep. You
Yeah.
think about there's all these things you can do for sleep. So don't be on your screens and blue light blocking glasses, and make sure you're getting up in the morning and getting light and all that. Well, how about you just make sure you move better too? That kind of helps. And so
how,
I don't
how,
think that's unrecognized. I just think it's a time issue.
right. And and sometimes it's a resource issue to be able to screen that. Um, the how much emphasis do you guys put on posture? We look at it as the baseline for movement. You know,
Uh,
go ahead. Go ahead.
It's important. Uh, we're very interested in, and it's in there. It's certainly not at the top of our list. Now we're not in your profession. We're on the kind of the technology side,
Right. Gotcha.
and but so we want to see. A lot of people are like, "Oh, my movement's great. I'm super mobile." Well, if your mobility is great and your stability is terrible, you have a problem.
Right. The
You need
posture.
both. So we'll see yogis come in and get the best mobility scores, but the stability is awful. I mean, they get valgus faults and, there's no stability. And then again, on symmetry being, and that's caused a lot of my problem is my asymmetry. I think a lot of that was maybe from the tennis, but that's, I think, caused a lot of my injuries. I mean, my Achilles one was the only really acute one where I decided in my infinite wisdom to go play rec soccer after
There you
not
go.
a soccer ball in 30 years. And then 5 minutes in, I was petrified I was going to tear a hamstring. So I got there super early to warm up. 5 minutes in, I felt like some guy stepped on the back of my calf and I ruptured my Achilles. But, a lot of it is preventable. So yeah, we look at posture. But our protocols are mainly based off of mobility and stability. And so we're saying those are the two that we're saying are actionable, and more posture and symmetry are contextual. But I think the important thing is, you're a doctor, whomever we're working with on the, medical side or personal training, whatever. We're just going to give you a bunch of information. And
Right.
if you want to focus on posture, by all means, but we're going to give you a bunch of stuff to look at.
Okay.
And just the one thing I will add, which I think is critical, is, I think more than half of Americans have a wearable now, and it's great. You wake up and every single morning you can see your sleep and your
Right.
HRV or what. You're getting that every single day, which is great. You need that every day. If you only measure your sleep once every 3-4 months, it's not valuable information. There's too many variables that can go into anything, you know? So same with movement. So we need you to move multiple times, because if you move once every few months, and the day before that day you've been in a car for 3 hours, or you've had a heavy workout the day before, it's not necessarily your baseline movement. So that's what we
Yeah.
try to do.
As far as movement goes, we start at posture and alignment. What we find a lot of times is body alignment is a habit, much like posture. Um, if you're and it all kind of rolls into this neat little ball of movement. If you move a certain way, stand a certain way, present your body a certain way on a regular basis, you can push yourself out of alignment.
So what, 100%. So how are you conducting that test?
Well, that test right now, um, for body alignment is without having a bunch of X-rays and doing a bunch of stuff, are just the what we can see with visually with a manual uh, assessment of the body, and I find that I correct alignment more often than I do um, the actual movement and or watching the mobility, because that's the stopping point or the catalyst for them not moving correctly or having a bad mobility or whatever the case may be. For example, I'll use one I use with some of my younger athletes a lot, and that's you're standing on the ground and your feet are facing you're facing north south and your feet are more east west. How are we going to conduct a squat at that time? So I can even assess the movement.
Yeah,
So I
I
got to
love
get you.
that. Yeah.
I got to get you aligned first. Not even thinking about posture yet, but I got to get you aligned just so you can execute the movement, just so we can get that information. But then when I watch you move, Then when I watch you move just like you stand or just like you present yourself when you're walking. And I say, okay, let's execute that squat. The first thing the athlete does is get down there, feet are facing east or west instead of north or south. And they're trying to execute a squat at that time. And of course, these are younger athletes. Some of those alignment corrections are made by higher level athletes themselves. Well, I got to do this to in order to squat. Well, I'm thinking to myself, you're doing a lot of things to be able to squat.
Yeah. So in looking at the deep squat and then things like posture and, balance, if someone has a really bad squat and really bad balance, like where do you start? You're going to start on the balance because
Right.
you want that. So, question. So we tell people like just squat as you would normally squat.
Right.
Which now you're probably cringing, and that's okay.
Well, no, you got to get that before you can, before you see an alignment problem, you got to have them go through, execute the motion.
Yeah. And so when you're having people not with their north south,
Right.
with your feet facing north south, and we've had people do like do your CrossFit stance,
Right.
and let's see how you squat, and then okay, now I want your feet north south, and we're gonna see a lot of where your compensation is. So again, I think that's a lot of good information, but I like the approach there, and it's so interesting to see people's compensation because what a lot are they're just trying to beat their score a lot, and they're like, all right,
Right.
I know how to game this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to squat lower. I'm like, all right, you go ahead and do that. So then what you see is people are going to lean further forward because they're a lot of times their dorsiflexion is terrible. So yeah, you can squat deeper, but you're going to lean forward and your score's going to be about the same. Your mobility score may be better, but your stability score is going to be worse. So,
Right.
But I like so we could, for people that are doing that east-west, we could make them line up and have them do, multiple movements. And we kind of come back to this decision. All right, do you want to make this a little more complex and probably get maybe better information? Or do you want to get something and ensure the person is regularly going through the screen? And I'm not saying we're right, and we're evolving.
No, I get the
yeah.
I get the premise for why you do it like you do it, because you can go back and you can identify, where they may be able to make up some scores in their performance based on what you get from the movement screen.
Yeah. So question for you, I'm going to take advantage of your expertise here. So we've always just done the deep squat, and we're unique in that way. There's a lot of other companies that are doing a lot. And I've consistently asked, are you going to do more movements? And my answer has always been no, unless you want to give me a business case for doing so. And so if we move away from your world, and just, we've been in a lot of personal training, and, we're in every single stretch lab, for instance, and they have, I think 530 locations in the US. Now for that, you just want to get so personal training. If you're training me, you want to see basic, maybe not you, because you probably want to do more. Your basic personal trainer, certainly not as educated as you. We just want to get a basic screen and help with our personal training and engage the trainer client. You don't need to get a second screen. But if they're maybe in your situation or something similar, if we did a second movement, what would you want it to be?
Lunge. Because with the lunge or lunge complex, we call it sometimes, where we do a forward lunge, a diagonal lunge, and a back lunge. But we get to see that we get to see movement basically on one leg. In athletics, you spend all your time basically on one leg if you're running, jumping, or whatever. Very seldom are you on two legs. If you think about it, stability on one leg. If you're let's say a rugby player and you're running and you make contact, you're usually on one leg. You're not on two.
That's so um so simple, and yet I've never, but I've never thought about it that way. Usually, when people put it simply, it's
And I
more.
only know one way to put it, and that's simply because while I may have a certain level of, you know, academic achievement and all those things, I'm Fred Flintstone. So I gotta break it down so it's simple. And
Yeah,
then I'm talking to athletes, and I don't want to, they're thinking about a lot of things in their performance. So we try to keep things as simple as possible. But that's the other movement I would like to see is, and and a lot of times you can see it off of just a single one-legged lunge. Um, and then we have some adjustments off our lunges, but that's neither here nor there because you can see it on just a regular lunge. And sometimes just always forward. You don't have to do the back or the side, but you can catch it. You can catch it. Um, from my experience, you can catch those kind of things early. With a squat, no, you go through a screening for a squat and a lunge, and the first time through, the way we screen is the first time through. I don't tell you anything, and you just execute the squat and the lunge. The next time through, we make a simple adjustment. What I don't want the athletes to do is start compensating, because most athletes are, and Chris, my partner, when he's here, we talk about that a lot, is the ability for high level athletes to super compensate. And they can compensate for a flaw, um, and then it actually becomes something they do that helps their performance. While younger athletes, more novice athletes, um, amateur athletes don't always have that ability to make that compensation at the level that your high level or professional athlete will. So
yeah.
so
That
what so we try to catch those to help prevent some injuries.
Yeah, one time this was post Achilles tear. I did we were looking to partner with a company, and they had a mat force plate
Right.
substitute, I guess, almost. And I did our screen, and I was able to see that I was putting 80% or 60% of my pressure on the right side and 40% on my left side. And so subsequent to that, everything's happened on my left side. So I don't think certainly my torn meniscus on the same side as my tear. I mean, it's completely related. Everything up the canino, ankles, ankles where it kind of starts. So
Right.
that's great information. Um, again, do we have a business case for that? I don't know. I
Yeah.
understand the value big time.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you unless there was an athlete, um, and I don't know that there's enough of them, but like yourself, that seems to have an asymmetry, and their injuries all happening on one side. So we go back and execute that screening and try to find out where the flaw is, because a lot of times with athletes um, a left-handed pitcher, you don't want to change their throwing motion. They're going to have all kind of asymmetry on that side,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what makes them a superstar. That's that's
Yeah,
what
it's
that's what gets them that extra, you know, 4 mile an hour on the fastball. So they go from 96 mile an hour fastball to 100 mile an hour fastball, but they're doing something at the hip level, or the way they're pushing off and their ankles, responding. Something's happening there that they're compensating for. but they're what we call, I don't know that it's a word or a term, but what we call super compensation. That's something you're able to do, not everybody can do. So if you're doing it and you're not getting injured, we might tell somebody else, hey, maybe you need to try it this way because you're affecting your groin every time you push off the rubber.
Yeah, it's so when we were early on in doing the screening, we were at Fort Bragg and just screening a bunch of people, and these guys all came in from the 82nd Airborne,
Right.
and I was at this point nervous every single time someone did a screen because I'm like, okay, is the system going to break? This is the first year. Is it going to break? Is it going to be accurate? All these guys were getting asymmetric on one side. And it didn't occur to me that there's a reason for that. And then one guy came in and he was completely asymmetric on the other side. And so obviously, they fall. Their technique when they fall, and they roll on one side.
Contact. Yeah.
So I'm like, oh man, we are actually halfway accurate. So that's kind of cool. And then, but you're working with high level people, but just take regular everyday person, and we see a ton of back issues out there, but simple stuff that I think the vast majority of people want to understand when their backs hurt. It's generally not an acute thing, and you didn't just all of a sudden have bad movement over the weekend and your back was you got a problem with your back on Monday. Just like, if you're diabetic, you don't just eat poorly over the weekend and have diabetes on Monday. So we just want to see if somebody has poor hip mobility or bad hamstring flexibility or not using their core. And if we can just identify simple stuff and give correctives, then we can make a dent in preventing a lot of, not even back injuries, but just a lot of back discomfort. I mean, the number of lost work days due to back injuries is in the hundreds of millions. And that doesn't always need to happen. So
I think, I think when we're doing any kind of assessment for performance, and I've since, long career with working with, higher level athletes, but I've since moved my client base or shifted it down to more, at the high school level. I'm picking athletes up now when they're about 13 or 14. So I'm an old guy, so I'm not trying to do a whole bunch, but I've found that making simple corrections when they're young, and I've taken several athletes now from junior high through the collegiate ranks, and I found that when doing that and teaching them some proper techniques and or teaching. I don't say it's correcting because they've never learned. So if you've never learned, you're not teaching, or you're not correcting, you're teaching. And then teaching proper ways to move. And then, we get away from some of the little aches and pains that they had coming in. I'll give you an example. One young lady, just her groin just was painful all the time. So how did we figure that out? Well, we looked at her movement. That was okay. That was in the acceptable range. So we looked at her body alignment. We suspected some things there, so she went and got an X-ray. And when she got that X-ray, the doctor, the physician, the orthopedic guy said, "Wow, this is an issue right here. This joint is misaligned and this and that." Well, we figured out that because of that misalignment, she was moving a certain way, which was affecting her groin.
Interesting.
And that was, we did some simple exercises to help her with her alignment. She's she was able to actually finish the season. We also taught her how to warm up appropriately and all those things. But yeah, it's interesting. I remember when I first started talking about movement way back in the olden days. Um, and everybody looked at me, well, you just kind of move how you move. I said, well, yeah, that's true, and that a lot has to do with you know, you know, height and weight, body style, all that stuff. If you're a short guy with and you tend to be heavier, you're gonna move a little different than a 6'6" guy that's a little leaner. So we try to put together all these cases that show the difference at one, different level, different ages, and then two, different body styles, and three, at different levels of competition or participation.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that also because we just started working with, where are you based?
I'm in Texas.
Okay. Oh, so am I. I'm in Dallas. Where are you?
I'm in between San Antonio and Austin in New Braunfels.
Oh, okay. There's a big, Newcomb's Tennis Academy. I remember.
Yep,
I don't know if
yep.
that's still there. Yeah.
Yep. I've been by there a few times, and they got a couple other places down here that those guys do pretty good. The thing that I find with all of them, and God bless them, and they've been successful, and I'm happy for them and everything. But there's very little assessing going on. Lots of training,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
very little assessment.
Well, and I got away with that. I played tennis for 8 years and pounding on the hard courts, and
Right.
but I was in my teens and then early 20s. So I think
It changes as you get older,
I know.
or as you raise levels. When the levels go up, that pounding. Unfortunately, as we rise in levels as an athlete, we also rise in age.
I've noticed that,
and the training level goes up. So
I know.
you're doing more to train. Just so the whole everything is compounded. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. So and then I'll get back to youth sports because that's where I was going. But just even I mean, I'm getting new stuff now. I just had my kind of a TFL, a little tweak, just doing a kick in Muay Thai, and I thought it was nothing, but that ended up becoming so much more, and my psoas was completely locked up, and I had to go in for 8 dry needling sessions over 2 weeks just to unlock it. Is nuts. And of course, also on the left side. But going back to youth sports, we started working in Atlanta with Northside Orthopedic, and they have a lot of athletic trainers that they work with that cover a lot of the high school athletes, whether it's
right.
High school or travel clubs, and that's over 20,000 kids, so that they're not seeing them all at the same time,
right.
And that's where having the ability to screen remotely is helpful. But and you're seeing all these people or all the kids in person, or
yes.
Okay, so I'm just interested.
Yeah, my client base is really, 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 it's micro right now, and that's kind of on purpose.
Oh yeah, well you can be more effective, I'm sure. So what are you seeing? So in youth sports, I hadn't thought about what you're dealing with is people getting a lot taller and their bodies changing a lot. So
right,
I would think that's probably a little more challenging than when you're working with professional athletes.
well, each level has their own presentation that you can kind of lump together. It's when you start with posture and alignment, you see a lot of misalignment, a lot of poor posture and things like that when they're younger. Sometimes those are corrected at the intermediate level. So when they're 18, 19, 20 going into college, a lot of that posture and misalignment is corrected, sometimes because of training. Other times because, we're human beings and we adapt and whether they're adapting on accidentally or on purpose, they're adapting. But sometimes they'll get to the higher levels, intermediate and professional levels, with these issues, or they've had these issues and they've not become a problem yet because they were able to compensate. And you have to go back and see, okay, is this a problem because of, or is this a compensation that makes them who they are?
Yeah.
Um,
So I want to come back to your lunge because I'm very interested in everything that you're focused on in your practice on. Yeah, maybe the deep squat's important, but let's look at some other things. Not necessarily first, but in conjunction with that.
yeah.
I had somebody give me tell me to, and maybe I think this may be a fairly common test: stand 2.5 feet away from the wall, to the side, plant one foot, and reach your other foot out slowly to try and touch the wall, and see if you could do that with balance without swaying or falling over. And I did that when I stood on. So I stood on my right side, 2.5, with my left shoulder facing the wall. I stood on my right side. I moved my left foot towards the wall and it touched the wall just fine. I turned around and I'm standing on my left foot, which is my less stable side, and moved my right foot slowly to touch the wall. I didn't get there before falling over.
So you're crossing your leg over.
No. So if I'm
This is the wall.
standing like this, and so it's reversed here. So if my one foot, the wall is this side.
Okay.
So I'm facing, my left shoulder's facing the wall. I'm standing on my right foot and balancing, and then I'm moving.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I'm moving my left foot, and I'm trying to see if I can. We're looking at, okay, is my right side balanced versus my left side? And when I turn it around and I'm turning the other way and balancing on my left leg, I
Yeah, I
can't.
gotcha.
Yeah. So all right. Is something like that helpful? Does that tell you anything? Because we're looking at balance at that point. You're talking about alignment, and it's not the same as balance. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive either. So
I think it's probably along the same premise of what when I'm looking at balance is I base everything off of the athlete's movement they're going to do in the sport.
okay.
So everybody runs in a field or court sport. So what I do is I say, okay, stand on one leg and then drive your knee up slowly like you're running. And if you can do that, that's the way I check balance. If the athlete can do that without toppling either way, then I get an indication of how well they're balanced when they're on one foot. Because again, if you're playing rugby and you're running and you take contact and you flop over, that could be, we can't make it definitive, but that could be a balance issue along with an alignment issue. So but it's all done. It's like the lunge. Everything is done, on one leg, and I bump you on either side or have you do something going either way. But the first part of that test is stand there, nice sports movement position, like you're getting ready to go. Come up to one leg, then drive the knee up, and then put it back down. And let's see where you are. And a lot of times I'll get a balance issue or a balance indicator from there. So.
And then what do you like? I'm sure a lot of things, but as an example, so someone's way off on one side or the other. I mean, let's say they're
okay. So sometimes so when we drive that up and they're here, sometimes if they can't stand there, sometimes it's a posture issue because they're trying to do this when they do that. Other times, if they do that and it's more of a wobble or a hop or something like that, it's probably an alignment issue because the foot is on the ground and it's facing, like we said, east west, and we're trying to bring it up, and the knee collapses to the inside. So you get that valgus pressure. That's an alignment issue, or it might be a strength issue. Dominant leg, like soccer players, they're usually really, really strong on their plant leg because they do that a lot. They're on that leg a lot when they're kicking. But on their swing leg or the leg they kick with, not so much. Balance is a little bit less. But for a soccer player, do I want to change that? Is that ever going to change? Probably not, because they kick with that foot. So they're always going to plant with the other foot. So we have to determine what's the most acceptable, or what's acceptable. If you can't even pick your leg up without falling over, that's probably not acceptable. But if you get it up there and you kind of wobble a little bit, is it a balance issue? Eh, eh. So it's there's a lot of I come from the old school, and you use a lot of eyeballs. There's a lot of art to the assumption. So there's a lot of reps that I feel like an individual has to take in order to understand which problem it may be. Okay, so if I had something that said, okay, who do you have? And this is a lot of information that you guys might not do this, and it might not be a business reason to do that. But if for me, if I had something that said, okay, they just executed that, nothing to really worry about, balance is within acceptable parameters. Okay.
Yeah. And so, thinking about what you do, and you have one-on-one time with your athletes on a fairly frequent basis versus, again, there's whatever it is, 300,000 personal trainers.
Yeah.
That, and one of the challenges we have, and, we got to look on the business side, which is, which markets are
Right.
Are bigger, but even with doing the one movement, and we're getting a lot of information, the onboarding and education
Right.
is required. So that's part of the reason why we don't do any more than what we do. And there's a few 100,000 personal trainers. How many of people with your expertise are there?
Right.
Nowhere close to that.
No.
Yeah.
So I understand, let's just be real. It costs us X amount of dollars to make this. Are we going to get that back when we put it out there? If we have all this stuff on there, or how much does it cost us to put all this stuff on there versus how much of it's going to get used? I get all that. And that's, what I was interested in when I got your information. Who is this taking movement and condensing it down into something that can be used often and easily, but is real? I mean, we've all seen the products out there that say they measure something, but they really don't, and say they do something, but it's really impossible for them to do with the way they're saying do it. And then then it's not helpful. If I had your screening product and I was going to use it, and I understood that for me, all it does is this squat, then I know what level to put that at and use it for me. So yeah, that is, I'm always interested in what's out there, and I know our audience is always interested in what's out there. And then again, it's how much data is too much data? How much do you need to be effective? And The squat is a foundational exercise. I think that can be, if measured correctly and used correctly, can be a fountain of information that anyone could use. So
For sure. Now, one thing we're doing now, is kind of going back to the study where your movement is affecting your sleep. So one thing we are doing now in the short-term roadmap, and should be out by July, is when the user onboards on our app, is the ability to, if you desire, to integrate your wearable data. And so, we're looking at both. And the example for me that really hit home was, I went for this long hike on a warm day and slept really well that night. But I also, when I woke up, my meniscus had flared up. So my Whoop score was a 97, and it said, all right, this is a peak day for you, or whatever the message is. Go out and, crush life. And yet my score was 30% lower on my movement than usually, because my knee had flared up from this long hike. And so I'm not ready to go do a peak performance that day. So it strikes me that you need more than just movement, and you need more than just this kind of physiological biometric data. Are you looking at some of that data as well? And if so, just, are you kind of correlating that at all? I mean, we're just trying to get a lot of data and kind of not necessarily just replicate the University of North Carolina, because there's not a lot more data out there than 7 years ago. But I'm just interested in your thoughts on the value of that working with your athletes, if any.
Well, we definitely look at and use sleep, the psychology of all of it, and we take a big look, especially with the younger athletes, at the nutrition and the macros, not necessarily performance nutrition, but it's the precursor to that. Is okay. Let's talk about your diet. What do you eat? And then I'll always get this, this great diet they tell me about. Then at the same time, I'm looking at mom, or I'm looking at, their buddy that they came in with, and then I'll go, hey, let's count everything. How many Snickers bars did you eat? How many Skittles? How many, and you find out they're getting their diet is 35% or 40% sugar, straight sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're not even counting the sugar and all the things in the processed foods. So you're not counting that. So that's what now, 55% sugar or sugars. And then you say, okay, how much, and I keep it simple. It's like, how much green stuff are you eating? How much protein do you get? Well, I drink, 3 protein shakes a day. Well, okay, let's look at that protein shake. Let's see how much sugar's in that. And when you start adding it all up, we have, 10% protein, 10%, carbohydrates that are good, and 80% sugars and processed stuff and fat. And so that's the information that we go on. And usually we correct that nutrition, which helps correct that sleep. And then I never thought about movement affecting sleep. So there's one that you guys give us that we didn't really look at, but now it makes sense.
So do you think, and my niece is just finishing her freshman year, she's playing D2 basketball up at Roosevelt in Chicago. And she's so incredibly disciplined. I mean, she's getting up 5:30 in the morning and doing her weights, then shooting a bunch of, just a bunch of free throws or whatever it may be. She's doing absolutely everything. And then it's like, oh, where do you want to go eat? Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're doing all this work,
and then you're going to go eat.
and then you're doing the, do you think on with your athletes, it's a lot of it's just a lack of education, or is it just, I know it, but I don't care? Because I mean, some people will be like, as way back in the day, this ages me, and so I used to go to Long John Silver's a lot.
Yeah, I know Long John Silver.
And it's like, hey man, I'm eating some fish. That's great for me. I'm like, all right, well, this thing is just fried. So again,
deep fried,
deep fried.
fried goodness.
Yeah. So what is it? I guess, but about lack of education, or I know, but I don't care.
I think you got three things: lack of education, one. I think I know, but I don't care is last. I think it's I know, and the middle one is I know and I care, but it's access. What do I have access to?
Yeah.
You know, so if we're gonna be real, they're gonna go to Chick-fil-A, or they can go to the dining facility at the school, and it's pretty much the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's some options over there that, green beans and salad, and there's some options in the most, big time schools, dining facilities, but it doesn't look like mom's cooking. You know what I mean? So the appeal is not there to take that, or they don't like the way it's prepared, but they know about Chick-fil-A. It's prepared the same way every time. And when you tell them, that might not be what you want to eat, or that might be having an effect. And a lot of studies out there about the effect of nutrition on sleep and the digestive system and all that stuff. So I think you're in the ballpark. Some of it's I don't know, or I know, but I don't really care.
Yeah. So I guess I got number one and number three, but all we're trying to do, we started with gathering a lot of information about movement. Now looking at maybe getting a little more on, balance on, either, whether it's a stability issue or whatever it may be, alignment issue, and then also pulling in all this other information, the measurables. And then, we do have a very basic, where's your nutrition? How did you eat yesterday on a 1 to 5? Very, very, very basic, but we're trying to keep it as simple as possible and yet get as much information as possible. We want to take this data and see how all of this stuff is affecting movement, and conversely, how your movement's affecting. There's a lot there, but I'm most excited about, it's great that we're helping a personal trainer or some professional with their client on their movement, but I want to see how this all ties together. Getting some data people in and just looking, and I don't know what it'll look like, but I'm interested to see.
I think that, again, is how much data is too much data. I've learned that at the, let's just say, high developmental level, which is high school, maybe early on in college. Here's the way I kind of group my athletes: beginning developmental level, high developmental level, that's junior high and high school; intermediate level, that's sometimes late high school, but mostly collegiate; and then professional or national team or elite level, those three. And I think the more information that the more teaching that can be done at the developmental and at both developmental levels, the less information you need once they get to the collegiate level. If you can teach them about sleep and, the basics in nutrition and what's going on there. And most importantly for me is, athletes learning how to move or identifying movement issues. So that's two pieces. One is, if there's an issue, that means they're having some problems and we're trying to prevent or correct from injury. Or two, just, learning how to move from the start. Because here's what we don't have anymore in schools: mandatory physical education.
I don't know what happened to that.
And mandatory. I remember going through all of the movement patterns and all those things that I teach right now in my PE classes. Was that, did we do some things that were crazy too, like battle ball and stuff like that? Of course we did. But I still remember in junior high and high school, it's just some basic movement lessons and teaching. So we don't have physical education anymore, and I think that's a big detriment to the athletes and just the people in general coming through high schools now.
Yeah, I try to listen to Peter Attia, but he I don't understand most of it. But he's too smart. But I believe he was on Huberman, who does break it down so that I can understand it. That if you had to, you need both exercise and nutrition, but exercising is more important.
Yeah,
you've got and that I wouldn't have thought that intuitively, but you're right. I mean, you're not getting these kids out. It's a big miss.
We could go into the education side and the academic side of physical training, PE, whatever you want to call it. It all starts with education, the physical education. And if it, PE teachers out there sometimes over the years, up and down, have had a bad rap. I admire every one of them. Every one of them out there that takes the job seriously and tries to actually teach. They've broken some of that responsibility off into health classes, but like you said, you still need the physical side. You need to go out there and challenge yourself to do a pull up. If you're in 8th grade, at least challenge yourself. And if you can't do but 2, so what? It doesn't matter. You get to learn some stuff physically about yourself, and you get to, you're doing these modules and these blocks of instructions where you learn how to move a certain way, or you start to understand movement patterns, whether you recognize what you're doing or not. That's what's happening. And then by the same, with that, you get better athletes, you get healthier people, you get all these things that you can see the lack of right now in some of the generations.
Well, it's kind of cool that you're getting to people early now. So
yeah, we try to.
Yeah.
But hey, listen, I just looked up at the clock, and it's always fun when I'm talking and I don't realize it's, we got to let you go so you can enjoy your weekend and the holiday. But we've enjoyed having you on. It's been fun. We could talk about this forever. I'm curious and interested in Fizmodo.
You nailed it. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I'm in, our CFO's in Austin, so I'm down there probably once a month. And next time I am, I'll reach out and do the short drive, depending on time of day, and would love to come in. And I've really enjoyed this. It's not often that I can be on a podcast and I'm asking a lot of questions, and someone that's an expert in movement. I've learned a lot, so I appreciate that. It's been selfishly quite helpful on my side.
Actually, it's we try to keep it conversational, and because there's a lot I think there's a lot to go around, and when it's a two-way street, and we're not just doing an interview and asking you a question and having you answer and asking you a question and having you answer. I like it better, so that's why we do it that way.
I think you do a great job of it. It's been one of my most fun ones to do, and it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to have you on. And ladies and gentlemen, this is Performance Talk. My name's Joel Gordon. We've been here today with Andrew Menter of Fizmodo, and we're out.